Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Yesterday, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke delivered a sobering assessment of our budget situation. We have $13 trillion worth of debt, and this year borrowing 43 cents out of every dollar the federal government is going to spend. Chairman Bernanke also expressed his concern that Congress has no exit strategy in place to get out of this mess. No strategy, no plan, and not even a budget. And this White House and Democrats that are in charge of this Congress don't seem at all worried about it. Yesterday, Mr. Hoyer said Democrats don't have a timeline or a deadline in order to make this decision. They're just going to keep spending as they go along. And the White House budget director says, we're not going to send any spending cuts up to Congress because nothing would happen to them. Now, every family knows that in tough economic times, it's more important, not less important, to do a budget. And that's why it's disturbing to see such indifference from Washington Democrats just days after a bleak jobs report. Listen, the Democrat spending spree is scaring the hell out of the American people, and it's hurting our economy. Not doing a budget, Democrats are passing up a critical opportunity to create jobs and to get our economy moving again. And they're banking on the fact that the American people won't even notice. But this really isn't inside baseball. Every American family puts a budget together, and believe me, the American people will hold the Democrats accountable for their budget failure and their massive spending spree. In about an hour, I'm going down to the White House with my bipartisan colleagues in the leadership to meet with the president. And I'm sure that the issue of this budget is going to come up. And I just think that the president needs to push his party to do a budget and to begin cutting spending now. Taxpayers are fed up. They want us to stop spending their money. And I think that it's time for Congress to begin to listen to the American people to get our arms around this budget mess that we're in. I want to say a few words about the financial regulatory conference that is getting underway this morning. I call for an open and transparent conference because taxpayers deserve to know exactly what is and what is not in this critical piece of legislation. I think they're going to see a flawed bill with job-killing implications that includes all kinds of lobbyist-inspired loopholes and special interest loopholes. But even more troubling is what they won't find in this legislation, and that's any reform of the government mortgage companies that sparked this economic crisis by giving high-risk loans to people who couldn't afford them. Yesterday, the Democrats rejected a motion on the floor to reform Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae on a vote that was suggested by our U-Cut effort. And the Democrats are really serious about stopping the bailouts. Them passing a bill that includes real reform of Fannie and Freddie is the right way to go. The American people want reform of this system, not more bailouts for the Democrats' friends on Wall Street and their allies. Your turn.
Mr. Leader, do you think that you talk about the spending is scaring the hell out of Americans here? Over the past year, you've talked a lot about how one of the reasons Republicans fell out of power was because you let the spending get away during the Bush years and during the time Republicans were in charge. Do you think that is why we're seeing buoyancy by Republican candidates, Rand Paul, Angle, people like this coming in and saying, let's just cut down to the bone if they were to win office?
Well, listen, I've admitted that Republicans made their fair mistakes when they had the majority in this institution. But I think our members have learned their lessons. And if you look at how our members have voted over the last year and a half, they all said no to the stimulus bill. They all said no to their budget with trillion-dollar deficits for as far as the eye can see. They said no to the national energy tax, no to their national health care bill. Our members get it. And that's why I think in this coming election, the American people are going to have a clear choice.
Related on spending, do you agree with that Tom Donahue of the Chamber that the government and taxpayers should pitch in to clean up the oil spill?
I think the people responsible for the oil spill, BP and the federal government, should take full responsibility for what's happening there.
Mr. Boehner, the Speaker signaled some desire to move a BP-related or an oil spill-related piece of legislation in August, maybe with some MMS reforms and things of that nature. Where are you on MMS and on raising the oil liability cap at this point? Do you see any room for legislation on that?
Well, I would hope that if they're going to move something that would address the problems in the Gulf, that they would work with our members on the relevant committees and do it in a bipartisan way. There's probably a lot that we can do, and we can do it together, and that would be the right course of action.
So it's splitting up MMS and the oil's back.
I don't know what people have in mind, but that's why you have bipartisan conversations from the beginning, so that you can build a bipartisan bill with bipartisan support.
And that hasn't happened yet?
Not to my knowledge.
Didn't Chairman Bernanke also say yesterday that now is not the moment to drastically cut government spending because otherwise it would interfere with the economy? And that sort of supports the Democrats' view that there should be some of these small stimulus bills that they're pushing.
Well, the problem is with their stimulus bills is that they're growing the size of government and they're not doing anything to create real jobs in America and to get the economy moving again. We've had this discussion up here, or some would describe it as an argument, since the day the stimulus bill was unveiled. It was all about more government spending, not more about allowing American families and small businesses to keep more of what they earn, because when it's all said and done, they're the ones who are going to have to get the economy going again, not a bunch of government bureaucrats that get hired.
If people get to keep more of what they earn, doesn't that also increase the deficit, what you're worried about?
You equate the idea of lowering marginal tax rates with less revenue for the federal government. We've seen over the last 30 years that lower marginal tax rates have led to a growing economy, more employment, and more people paying taxes. And if you look at the revenue growth over those 30 years, you've got a prime example of what we've been talking about. Ronald Reagan had this fight in 1980 in a Republican primary. And you all remember the term voodoo economics that came from one of our later presidents. But the fact is that we're strangling the economy. And if you look at where the tax rates are going to be here in several years, you'll see that high earners are going to pay about 30% more in taxes to the federal government. That's money that won't go into the economy. That's money that won't be invested to create jobs. And it's going to have a damaging effect on our economy long term.
Last question.
As a follow-up to that, are you saying that the Bush tax cuts didn't affect the deficit that we're in now?
The reductions in '01 and '03 were to respond to an economic problem. '01 was done before 9/11. '03 was done in response to what happened to the economy. But that's not what led to the budget deficit. It's not the marginal tax rates. If you look at the problem that we've got here, it's a spending problem that has grown over the last 5 or 6 years. A real spending problem. The revenue problem we have today is a result of what happened in the economic collapse some 18 months ago.
Mr. Boehner, there have been a slew of hearings on the BP oil spill. Some are saying it's just sort of overkill. Do you see any value in multiple committees having multiple hearings and waiting until things go through the regular order?
Well, this is Congress at its best.
So
Why don't we get the oil stopped, all right, figure out what the hell went wrong, and then have the hearing and get the damn law fixed?